A long time ago, in the ancient kingdom of Nzam, ruled a mighty and fierce king called Ikenga. King Ikenga was a mighty warrior who had conquered many kings and subdued kingdoms. He took captives of them and possessed their treasures and lands until his kingdom grew vast and became a great empire. Years passed, and as the king grew old, his fame and power weakened. He was no longer the great and mighty King Ikenga that was revered and feared by all. Neighboring kings and kingdoms who trembled at his feet and brought in their yearly pledges of gold and silver stopped making pledges to him. There were rumors that even his armies had grown weak as he was, and that his kingdom would not have a chance against an invasion from a stronger king. This worried the old king so much that he barely slept at night. King Ikenga was not only worried about strengthening his kingdom's fortitude, but also who would ascend his throne and rule with such might and strength as he did. For only then can he descend from the throne, knowing that the great Nzam Empire were in the hands of a great warrior like he was. King Ikenga had 14 sons, all of which were born by the great queen of the kingdom and the royal concubines. But there was one, the son of a handmaid, who at his birth was banished from the kingdom with his mother. For it was an abomination for royalty to mingle with the commoners. He lived in the deepest forests, far from the beauty and splendor of the Nzam palace, where no one recognized nor acknowledged him as the king's son or a prince of the great Nzam empire. The 14 royal princes were men of great stature, valiant warriors with great and mighty strength like their father. They were captains over 1,000 foot soldiers each, and had gone to wars and returned gloriously, conquering kingdoms and villages for their father. King Ikenga was blessed to have such great sons, yet this was his source of great worries. Who among his 13 sons would he entrust his great kingdom to, without fears of being overthrown by a stronger king? Who among them would the entire kingdom tremble at his feet? As King Ikenga lay awake at night, pondering on this matter, a servant ran in trembling. The fear on his face spoke of great despair. "Disaster," he cried. "Calamity, my king. Great disaster has come upon us." The king sprang to his feet, but a sharp pain ached through his body and bones, reminding him that he was no longer the great warrior and gallant warrior that struck as lightning in the face of danger. "The fairy beast has surfaced," the servant cried in even more despair. King Ikenga's heart dropped, and his waning strength failed him, for he would have given commands to the captains of his great army if this was a war from another kingdom. But the fairy beast brought with it even worse disaster than any battle or war. The fairy beast was a 12 feet tall gigantic monster with the face of a chimpanzee, a thick crocodile skin with long thorns for hairs. The color of its skin was glowing red, and his eyes burned as embers. It spewed balls of fire from its mouth, and with its sharp claws shredded in pieces whatever came its way. Its thick crocodile skin was impenetrable, so much that no spear or arrow can pierce it, and it had a long razor-bladed tail that slashed and swept everything around it. It took King Ikenga 5 years to destroy the last fairy beasts in the land, but there was one which escaped him, and now it has come to destroy the Nzam Empire. By morning, a quarter of the Nzam Empire was blazing with fire, and an incense of thick black smoke filled the air, reaching up to the clouds. The streets were littered with dead bodies of soldiers, citizens, and animals alike. The fairy beasts spared no one. So many houses were destroyed and torn down. Even some tall trees were uprooted from their stump, and the entire kingdom was left in fear and great despair of the fairy beasts that would return again at night to cause havoc and great disaster. A council meeting was held that morning in the great courts of the king, and the king gave a decree before the 13 princes and the ministers, the wise men, and all the people, that whosoever among the 13 princes that would kill the fairy beasts and deliver Nzam from this great calamity would ascend the throne as the next king and rule the whole of Nzam empire. The 13 princes accepted this quest with great excitement, each ready to prove himself more valiant and stronger than the other. The king gave them as many soldiers as they needed, even to his entire army. The first prince set off that night with 1,000 foot soldiers and 500 horsemen with swords, arrows, and spears. They camped at the outskirts of the kingdom and awaited the fairy beasts. At midnight, the growing monster emerged, raging and spewing more fireballs than he had done the previous night. They threw spears and shot arrows, but none could as much as scratch the fairy beasts. He raised balls of fire at them, and the entire army fled, leaving the prince to his fate. The prince lunged forward with his sword, and the beast spewed more fire. The beast wreaked more havoc that night than he had done the previous night, and in the morning the body of the prince was found among the citizens of Nzam, who had been shredded in pieces by the beast. The second prince faced the beast, and he too met the same fate as the first. The third, the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth prince. The seventh fled after his army was destroyed, and the eighth abandoned his soldiers and even his horses and ran back to the palace. The ninth prince withdrew from the quest for fear of losing his life like the others, and so did the 10th prince. But the 11th prince marched forth to the beast, and that was the last time he was seen. Nzam kingdom was at the verge of complete destruction, and King Ikenga was weary of sending forth his sons to their death. But he was now old and weak and couldn't fight off the beast himself. The 12th prince never returned, and only one soldier returned to tell the story. As the 13th prince marched against the beast that night, the people of Nzam said prayers to as many gods as they worshipped, asking that they would be merciful to bring them deliverance through the 13th prince. And in the morning, a sound of rejoicing was heard from afar as the soldiers returned, chanting and jubilating. The gods had answered their prayers, and the beast had been slain. But it was not the 13th prince who killed the beast, for he himself fled when the beast raged. His soldiers had scattered, and the beast charged towards the villages to destroy whatsoever ruins were left of it. When suddenly a young warrior on a horse came galloping out of the deep forests and charging towards the fairy beast with a large brown wine skin, the size of a thick pillowcase filled to its brim. He raised it above his head and swung it in several circles before releasing it at the fairy beasts. The wine skin broke and it tore open, baptizing the beast with water. The fairy beast shrieked and moaned painfully as it staggered backwards and fell to the ground, groaning and screaming like it had been poured acid. The young warrior jumped down from his horse and slew the beast, severing its head from its body. After hearing this, the entire kingdom raged with shouts of joy and jubilation, but the king sat stunned, staring at this young warrior, who was unmistakably his son, whom he had banished from his kingdom many years ago. Not only was the boy a replica of the king when he was much younger, he also had very hairy skin and had deep brown eyes like that of the handmaid. The kingdom was in uproar when the king told them about the boy, even the young warrior. although his mother had told him of how much of a great warrior his father was, did not know that the great warrior whom she spoke of was the king. And when asked how he defeated the beast, the boy spoke that the beast was a creature of magic and fire, and that the water was the only weapon that could weaken it. King Ikenga kept his words, and on the 15th day of the celebration against the defeat of the beast, the young warrior was crowned a king, and he ascended the throne of the Nzam Empire in the stead of his father. And thus ends the story of the fairy beast and the 14 princes.